So this is what we were talking about before, the opt-outs. So you can see where your city stands, and then the opt-ups. So for the opt-outs, we're at about 2.5 to 2.8%, depending on how it's counted. And then the opt-ups is about 2%. But different, Portola Valley's at 93.6 because, they were all enrolled in it. Menlo Park, you're at 3%. Brisbane, you're at 3.5%. Good job in your opt-ups.
Does that count the municipal count?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have multiple municipal accounts, that
Or
each
probably
one.
a bigger percentage. 'Cause we're
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. Good? Good to go? Okay. So we're going to talk about energy procurement. And Siobhan Doherty is the director for this group. She's on vacation or coming back today, so I'm pinch hitting for her. But I've done a lot in procurement. So we're going to go over the team, the goals, procurement authority, a lot of regulatory requirements, and what our strategy is on procurement. So this is the Power Resource team. Siobhan Doherty is the director. She's got about 15 or 20 years of experience in energy procurement, a lot of it in the solar arena. Chelsea Keys is our Power Resources manager. She spends a lot of time working on resource adequacy and also monitoring the contracts that we've entered into. Peter Levitt is our associate manager of DER strategy. So Peter's leading the resilience project and getting the solar plus storage facilities to medically vulnerable, to community resource centers and critical facilities. And he's also working on distributed energy, like for community centers, like the Bellhaven one. That would be something that he'll be working on. We're also have an open position to bring in another person to work on DER strategy as well. DER standing for Distributed Energy Resources. Sarah Mata, she just joined us probably about a month ago. She's a renewable energy analyst and compliance analyst, so she does a lot of the work on all of the reporting that we have to do for what we're doing in the procurement side, and also just internal analysis of the projects. And then Mehdi Shariari is actually starting on Monday, and he's our senior renewable energy analyst. So just some of the key terms that we will be going over here, and these are terms you're going to hear all the time at board meetings. Renewable energy, we'll talk about what exactly that is. Greenhouse gas-free energy, what the difference is between those two. The RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is basically a statute in California law as to how much renewable energy a retail service provider needs to deliver to their customers. REC is a renewable energy credit, which is the renewable attribute associated with renewable energy. PCL is the power content label. This is what we send out to all of our customers every year to indicate how much, what the percentages of different resources are. The IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, Jeremy touched on that. We'll talk about that more. RA, Resource Adequacy, and PPA, Power Purchase Agreement. So those are a lot of the acronyms that we use in the power procurement side. You will be tested on this at the end of the day. Not really. So our goal is to design a diverse power portfolio. So if you look at our strategic goals, this is the first goal, which is to be 100% GHG free by 2021, to be sourced by 100% California RPS eligible renewable energy by 2025 on a time coincident basis, provided it is economically viable. So that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier. And then have a 20 megawatts of new local power by 2025. And then goal number 3 of our strategic goals is to stimulate development of new renewable energy generation and storage projects in San Mateo County and California through our procurement activities. So the authority that the board has given to us, what I can approve as the CEO, what I can approve in consultation with our general counsel and the board chair, and then what comes to the board. So basically, any contracts for energy and energy-related products, which is electricity, capacity, RA, distributed energy resources. If it's a contract for 12 months or less for energy, or 36 months or less for local resource adequacy, then I have the, you've given me the authority to go ahead and sign those contracts. And that's basically because we need to move quickly sometimes on some of those things, and to wait for a board meeting would not be, we might lose the opportunity.
And so that has no dollar amount?
No dollar amount, it's really a time amount, yeah. Medium term, so contracts that are between 12 months and 5 years. I consult with General Counsel, which is David Silberman, and Jeff Alfs, who's the board chair. And assuming they agree, then I will enter into those contracts. And then anything longer than 5 years comes to the board for your approval.
What percentage is generally in these, or does it just vary?
Yeah, well, most of the RA, well, the local RA, there's 3 flavors of RA. I'm not sure we're getting into all that detail today, but the local RA, so that all of that is less than 3 years or up to 36 months. The system RA is usually less than a year. So usually most of the RA would be something that I can contract for without having to bring it to you. When we started, all of that was being brought to the board, and it was just so overwhelming for the board, and it just took so much time that we changed that.
I think Chelsea this year, I think negotiated 90 different agreements for.
Yeah, I think we had 91 agreements for RA this year, which was, I think the previous year was 37. So RA is just, it's takes a lot of time.
Yeah, Jan?
Yes.
Is the 20 megawatts of new local power include any contracts for energy efficiency? So
Not at this time, no.
no, so it's just new power, not energy saved.
No, we actually are not focusing on energy efficiency because PG&E still does that.
Okay.
And there's a charge on everyone's bill that's a non-bypassable charge that funds the energy efficiency programs that PG&E does. So rather than duplicating what they're doing, we just leave that to them.
Okay.
Marin Clean Energy did decide to approach the the Public Utilities Commission and ask that they be allocated the funds for energy efficiency and run those programs. They advised us to not do that. It's a lot of people, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of reporting, and so we took that advice. So what is renewable energy versus greenhouse gas free energy? So renewable is electricity derived from a source that is not depleted and is not derived from fossil or nuclear energy. So if you see here, that would include biomass and waste. So biomass is like burning trees or waste products, wood waste products, geothermal, solar, all kinds of solar, wind, and small eligible hydro. So in California, small hydro is defined as less than 30 megawatts. That's just how they defined it back in the 60s and 70s. Greenhouse gas free, there's some duplication. So solar and wind and small hydro are also greenhouse gas free, but also large hydro. So hydro over 30 megawatts falls into the category of being greenhouse gas free, but it's not RPS renewable according to California's definition. And then nuclear is considered greenhouse gas free, but again, not renewable. So to date, when we do for our default product, the 50% renewable comes from the resources on the left side. The additional 45% to get us to 95% GHG free is all coming from large hydro. So 45% is large hydro, 50% is renewable. And we'll look at a power content label. And yeah. So then there's the renewable portfolio standard. and this is also known as the RPS. So this is a law that requires a certain amount of energy to be procured that is renewable, and it steps up. This year it's 33%. The law requires us to be at 60% by 2030, and then 100% carbon-free by 2045. So when we started out, we were already at 50% renewable. So we were accelerating the state's goals, from the very beginning. And then when our goal is to be 100% renewable by 2025. So again, we're accelerating the state's goals. Renewable energy is verified by REC ownership. So a REC is it's an electronic certificate that basically tracks every megawatt hour of renewable energy that's generated, and there's a whole tracking system that the state has developed called REGIS, the Western Renewable Energy Generation Information System. So every time we buy renewable energy, part of our contract is that the renewable energy credits that are generated from that are transferred into our account at REGIS so that we can then provide the compliance report that says, yes, we did actually purchase this energy and we have all of these recs to back it up. So it's like a stock certificate, as it were, for renewable energy that we put in our account. And so what is the REC? It is a certificate of proof issued through the accounting system established by the Energy Commission, that's REGIS, that 1 unit of electricity was generated and delivered by an eligible renewable resource, and it includes all of the renewable and environmental attributes associated with that renewable resource. So that's what the law defines as the REC. And you'll hear that term a lot when we talk about renewable energy. So then there's the power content label. That's been in existence since 2009, and that requires all retail sellers of electric energy, including us, to disclose accurate, reliable, and simple to understand information on the sources of energy that are delivered to their customers. And it is exactly defined by the Energy Commission as to what that power content label will look like. And so this is what it is. It states what the eligible renewables are. So we just talked about that: biomass and biowaste, geothermal, eligible hydro, solar, and wind. And then, so that falls under renewables. And so for us, for our 2018 power content label, we actually were slightly above our 50%. We ended up procuring 51%. And then for coal, of course, we have 0 because one of our policies is to not contract for any coal. And then in 2018, our goal was to be 85% GHG free. So we had procured 35% large hydro to get to that 85% GHG free, and then no natural gas, nuclear, or other. And then unspecified is the other 15% that brings us to 100% in 2018 of all of our resources. So for 2019, when we issue this power content label, it will show 50% renewable, 40% large hydro, and then 10% unspecified. For 2020, it'll be 50% renewable. We're still having a conversation about whether the nuclear is also going to show up here. Our staff recommendation was to not have nuclear, and it was a close vote at the board. Once we get the actual allocation, we'll be bringing that back to the board. We would still prefer to have the nuclear stay 0, and then for 2021. Will be 50% renewable, 50% large hydro probably. And then we'll start ramping up as we're working to our 100% renewable. So that's the Eco Plus. For Eco 100, we're sourcing that with 50% solar and 50% wind. And then the final column on the right is the California power mix. So that's how we kind of, it's not necessarily PG&E, it's what's the overall mix in California. And so you can see that there is a little bit of coal. There's a lot of natural gas. There's some nuclear and some unspecified. So for the state overall, it's about 31% renewable, that will need to be 33% renewable for the 2021 because that's the law that requires us to be at 33%. Go ahead.
That actually includes the other CCAs then?
The California Power Mix, I think, includes everything. Do you know, is that the whole state and they just averaged that all out?
Yeah, it's an average of the whole state.
Yeah, so everyone reports
So
in.
every load serving entity in the state is blended into that.
So it'd be PG&E, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, all of the CCAs, all of the municipal utilities, everyone. And every entity has to put out this power content label. So we sent that out in a postcard, I think in October. And the other side of that postcard talked about our electric car incentive. So there's a new format that's coming out for in 2021 for the 2020 reporting, which is going to include a graphic that shows the GHG portion and comparing it also with a graphic.
One more question.
Yeah.
Does the 2018 CA Power Mix actually include PCE's numbers as well? So it's truly everything?
It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Jeremy talked a little earlier about the Integrated Resources Plan. So this is a requirement that was mandated by a bill passed in 2015. But we also did our own Integrated Resource Plan internally. I should have a copy of that to give to you. But there's also a compliance requirement to do this. So we're in the midst of that right now. And basically, it's a state process to make sure that there's going to be enough power and there's going to be enough of the right kind of power for the state. So to make sure that we're meeting the reliability needs, the RA needs, and also the GHG and renewable needs. So it's a complex process at the PUC. And this year we're submitting our IRP to the PUC. And last year we were doing some modeling. So we will be bringing this to the board multiple times this year. So in March, we're going to provide an overview of the process. And Siobhan will be getting into more details on that for you. In April, I think we're going to be coming with kind of an idea of where we think we're going to be going. And then in May, we're going to be asking you to approve our actual integrated resource plan because we need to submit that to the public utilities by July 1. So the PUC does not approve our integrated resource plan. You do as the board, but they certify it in terms of, yes, you turned it in, and they check that we did, that all of the pieces that are supposed to be in there were done. And there's certain assumptions that they require us to use, or certain templates that they require us to use, so that all of the different load serving entities are, turning in something similar, so that they can mash it all together and try to figure out what's going on in the state. Resource adequacy. So basically the state determines, what is the overall amount of generation we need to have in California, and then they want a 15% margin on top of that, so that if a power plant was to fail, that the lights would stay on, or if a tree was to fall down somewhere and make a line fall down and a plant goes out, that the lights stay on. And that reserve capacity is called resource adequacy, or RA. And basically it's calculated by looking at what is our overall peak, how much, what is our overall load at peak times, and then adding a 15% margin onto that. And that's how much resource adequacy we need to contract for. And there's 4 different kinds here. There's system, PG&E local, PG&E other, and flex. So we have to make sure that we buy, they tell us how much of all of these different things we are supposed to procure. And that's why we did 91 different contracts last year for RA, because we have to buy the right kind. It has to be in the right location. There's actually 6 or 7 local areas for PG&E that we have to go through. And actually, I think Siobhan went over this at the last board meeting. But, you know, she's always happy to talk about RA. It's our, it's our not favorite subject, but it takes a lot of time, and it's a very complex thing. And it's all transacted bilaterally, which means that we transact with another generating resource, and we buy a certain amount of RA from them. So we have to buy it by month. So we need to buy it for January, February, March, April, May. It's different amount for every month, depending on what our load is for that month. And then we have to buy these 4 different flavors for every month to meet this requirement. So it takes a lot of time. It's super important, and we do a good job in making sure that we procure all of it that we are assigned to procure. But because it is a bilateral market, there's no organized market for it. There's not a lot of price transparency. So this last year, prices went really high because you know, there were some shortages in the market. It's all supply and demand kind of thing. And when there's not a market where you can see all the bids and the asks in one place, you know, there's not as much ability to control how much we're going to pay for it.
Do the CCAs work together at all and compare?
Yes, yes. In fact, we worked with the 5 CCAs down here, us, Silicon Valley, San Jose, East Bay, and Monterey Bay. We actually worked together to purchase the RA. But yeah, it's still complicated because we still each have to contract separately. Even if we get we might get an offer from someone for a certain amount, but then we divvied it up among those of us who needed it, and different people have different requirements because all of us have different kinds of loads. So, you know, San Jose is in a warmer place, so they might have more requirement in the summer because their peak will be higher in the summer, and it's all just different. It's fun, you know, this is really interesting business. So, so I just want to talk about our procurement. We use a risk management approach in our power purchasing. You know, we always, of course, are looking for the lowest cost supply as well as diversity. So in our IRP, and I'll make sure I get a copy of that to you, and it's on our website. You can look at it. But there's 6 different areas that we look at in terms of diversifying our risk. So we look at term length. So we want to procure some resources short term, some medium term, some long term, so that we are not always, so that we're a little bit in the market and a little bit exposed to the market, but also a little bit protected from the market and doing some long-term contracts where we know exactly what the price is going to be. We also look for ownership diversity. So when we're doing long-term power purchase agreements, we want to make sure that we're not contracting with the same firm for a large amount of our business, because what happens if that firm goes belly up? And we want to make sure we're protected there. We also look for different locations because there's different attributes of projects based on where they're located. So, for example, the wind profile in Palm Springs is different than the wind profile in the Bay Area as to when are the windiest times there and when might we be getting power from those facilities. Similarly with solar, you know, that's more or less equal throughout the state, but you know, as you might expect in the Southern California desert, you're going to get higher production from projects there than you would up north. On the other hand, there's transmission, there's cost risk for getting that power from Southern California to here, that there might be some congestion on the lines, that everyone's trying to move their power on the same line, and that we have to pay for that. So we look at that as well. Look at different technologies. We don't want to be only solar. We want to be solar, wind, geothermal, lots of different technologies. We look for different sizes. We don't want all of the projects to be big. We want a variety of sizes. And then also additional.
Why do you want a variety of sizes?
Well, if you have all big projects, for example, and one of them stops operating, then we're exposed.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And then additionality means we want new resources to be built in California. So we want to be making a difference in terms of getting new steel in the ground and helping to build out. Plus, prices are going down and new projects are less expensive than previous projects were. So we can get some price advantages there. So, and we don't have cost on here, but obviously cost is an important. That one, we don't want a lot of diversity there. We want it all to be low cost. So this shows our resource mix for our two products for this year, what we expect. Solar, for the Eco Plus, we expect solar to make up about 20% of our product. Wind will be 12%, biomass 12%, small hydro 5%, geothermal 2%, and then GHG free will be 45% of that. And then for our Eco 100 will be 50% wind and 50% solar. So we project out how much power are we going to need to provide to our customers. We look at what resources we have available and make sure that we're procuring a sufficient amount to meet that load. So this is a graph that shows on the left-hand side is the number of megawatts. On the bottom is the hour of the day. So there's 24 hours per day. And the blue line is our load. So it shows how the load in San Mateo County varies over the course of the day. And you can see that we peak, and this is on average for the whole year, but we peak at about hour 18, which is like 6 to 7 p.m. And we're at our lowest at about 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. Of course, different months look different. And so our goal is to make sure that for every hour of every day for the year that our supply hits that blue line of our load. And we're still in the process of completely fulfilling our procurement for 2020, which is why these aren't at the top. Although if you were to look for the first quarter, January, February, March, we actually have procured 100% of our need. And so this is made up of a number of projects. If you look at the, this here, not sure what color that is, kind of, what color is that? Orangish brownish. That's the Wright Solar project that just came on. So because it's solar, it's going to produce most during the daytime and won't be producing all when the sun is down. Shiloh, this dark blue, is a wind project. So that produces actually a little less during the afternoon and more in the evening and the night. So wind and solar are good complements to each other because when it's a super hot day, often the wind is not blowing, but the sun is out. So we'll be looking for more wind too. Then there's also Buena Vista, which is another wind project, this light orange. And again, you can see that produces less in the midday and more in the evenings. Then we have some hedges. So we've contracted with some companies to provide us with power and renewable power at a certain price. And these are the hedges. So this one, direct, is power that we actually contracted for at the very beginning when we started out. And that is going to finish up this year. So we'll be procuring from someone else for that. And actually, we have new projects coming online too. So we have two hedges from Direct Energy, the green and the blue. We have a hedge with Constellation, which is this kind of flesh-colored one, and then the shows another one with Direct. I know, so Siobhan would be able to explain this better than me. But anyway, this shows that we have a variety of suppliers, and over the course of the year, they make up our mix. So when we look at 2025, and this again shows the megawatts on the y-axis, and then the 4 different months representing the 4 different seasons of the year in 2025. So this is what our load is projected to look like in 2025. So when in the wintertime, it's actually interesting, we're a winter peaking entity, which means that we use more power in the winter than we do in the summer. Because the weather here is pretty moderate, there isn't a high air conditioning load here like there would be in the Central Valley. So our summer load, interestingly in July, is lower than our winter load from lighting and things like that in January versus July. But this is what we're trying to match in 2025. We want to match this on an hour-by-hour basis with renewables. So this is what we're going to be getting from Wright and Mustang. We've already contracted for those. Those are our long-term contracts. And the puzzle that we're going to try to solve is to contract from other renewable resources and storage to exactly match that profile with all renewable power. So we're really excited about trying to figure out how to do that. And we'll be coming to you over the course of time to tell you how we're planning to figure that out. But we're working on that right now. So this has a lot of information on it. So as we mentioned, we're subject to the California RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which requires 30% renewable by 2020 and 60% renewable by 2030. And as you can see, it just goes up kind of linearly across these years. This goes up to 2029. So that's what we're required to do by law. The second line of renewable energy shows what our own goals and policies are. So our goal is to be 50% renewable now, and by 2025 to be 100% renewable. So we will be exceeding the statutory requirement for every year. The GHG free is what we're doing right now. So we're at 45%. So the 50 plus 45 for 2020 equals 95%. By 2021, we're going to be 100% GHG free. So it shows that GHG free up through 2024, and then we'll be moving over to 100% renewable going forward from 2025 on. And then conventional energy, actually that should be a 5% there, right here. Yeah, this should be 5%, because this needs to add up to 100% for what we're delivering. So that's
So Jan, the effect of this is that we're moving away from large hydro and nuclear.
Yeah, we actually don't have any nuclear in our portfolio. At our last, our January board meeting, we did have a discussion about the nuclear. Were you there?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, in order for us to actually meet this, we need to be able to control every project that we're contracting for. And right now, for large hydro, if we wanted to have that in our portfolio, we aren't able to what's called schedule it so that we know every hour how much of that we would get. Maybe things will change by 2025 and we could do that. But currently we're not able to do that. We contract for it, but it's really on a yearly basis. We contract for X amount of megawatt hours for the course of the year, not knowing exactly when that's going to be delivered to us. And then our scheduling coordinator balances that out with other resources. So it's a different way of contracting once we try to meet this hour by hour match with renewables. Yeah. That's our goal. I mean, we're defining, I guess the goal is 100% clean by 2025. We're defining clean as being California RPS eligible. So the board can change that if they want. We hope they don't. That's what we're targeting. And then this just shows by resource type what we have contracted for so far. And if we look at 2020, there's a little bit of small hydro, there's wind, the solar. PCC1 is other renewables that meet, there's three varieties of renewables. PCC1 is the best product content category 1, which means it was produced in California or was delivered to California and used when it was delivered. PCC2 is renewables from out of state that are that we count, but that they're not used exactly at the same time that they're delivered. And the rules are changing with the Air Resources Board as to the greenhouse gas content that's assigned to it. So they've changed the rules so that if we're contracting for wind from, say, Washington State or Oregon, the wind will not be assigned a 0 GHG content. It will be assigned whatever the mix is for that. I'm not saying this right. What are they assigned? They're assigned the mix for that area. So even though we're contracting for wind, it's not going to have a 0 GHG content. So we're moving away from this PCC2 because basically the rules are changing, and we're going to be contracting only for this category 1, which is if it's delivered in California and used immediately when it's delivered, then it maintains its 0 GHG content counting as far as the Air Resources Board goes. Yeah, it doesn't. A lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. These are the rules. You have a puzzled look on your face, but yeah, we're all puzzled by it. Yeah, it doesn't. It's just they're changing the rules, and part of it is because there are entities that don't want to see renewables coming in from out of state. They want them to be in state. So we can contract for out of state renewables as long as they're dynamically scheduled is the word, then we can count them as being, this product content category 1.
With emissions accounting, there's a lot of concern about double counting as well. Climate change is a global thing, so it doesn't really matter whether the emissions we save here or there from the environmental perspective, but from the state's perspective, it does matter. So it's making sure that multiple states aren't claiming the same renewable attribute from the same solar facility.
That makes sense.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But the thing is, if we're contracting for wind power from Oregon, that's being delivered to us, and Oregon is not counting that.
Yeah.
But so it's not. So it devalues wind or solar from out of state. So that's why we're, moving away from that, because we want to be 100% carbon free.
But Oregon, if it's generated there, Oregon isn't, because the reason why it made sense is if another state's counting it, then it makes sense that you wouldn't count it somewhere else. But
Well, they shouldn't be counting it. If we have a contract for that and it's being delivered to us, I don't think they're counting it, are they?
Yeah.
But
okay, I'm confused.
yeah, it's
That's
a,
fine.
Yeah, it gets into the complexities between accounting, like attribute accounting, and just the way the electrons actually flow in the grid, and this argument that the pool of resources, several slides back, Jan shared the renewable blends by different products, that little table, in the unspecified section. That's kind of the devil in the details, where it's just wholesale energy bought from the market, and it's just a blend of whatever is being put into the market at that point in time that determines the emissions associated with that. So there's, don't want to derail, but
Wow.
yeah,
that's
it's
where it gets complex.
complicated, yeah. So anyway, so basically, we have more procurement we need to be doing to meet our load. That's basically what this is saying. We talked a little bit about term length, how we're looking for different term lengths to diversify our portfolio. So for 2020, you can see that we have a mix of terms as we go farther out. We have long-term contracts that we've contracted for with the Wright and the Mustang projects, but we haven't contracted yet for the medium term or the short term, obviously, because we're not there yet. So this is just to demonstrate that. This is the list of the power purchase agreements that we have contracted for. So you can see for the solar, we have 2 long-term contracts, the Wright Solar project, which we contracted, which just started delivering to us in January, and that's a 25-year contract, so that will deliver to us till 2045 in Merced County, and we're having our ribbon cutting there on May 8th. I hope you can come.
We need to be there.
Okay,
We've been following you guys on that.
okay, good.
Sorry to do it.
Yeah, come. And then the Mustang project is the 100 megawatt project, which will start delivering to us at the end of this year. The wind projects, you can see that those are all shorter term contracts. We have this 150 megawatt contract for the Shiloh project up in Solano County, but that's just a 5-year contract. We have a 38 megawatt project, the Buena Vista, which is out in the Altamont Pass, and that's just a 5-year contract. And then we have a contract with the Karen Avenue Wind Farm, which is down near Palm Springs, and that was just a 3-year contract that will be falling off in July. And then we have some small hydro projects, the largest one being 7.5 megawatts that we have a 20-year contract for, and then these other ones, 2 megawatts, 2 megawatts, 1 megawatt. They're really tiny, and they're way up in Shasta County. And this, so this shows, the diversity in contract length, diversity in resource, diversity in ownership, diversity in size, and then this is the diversity in location. You can see these projects are at different places throughout the state. And this is the Wright Solar Project. This is the 200 megawatt solar project in Merced County where we'll have the ribbon cutting. And it is just massive. And it'll be, if you can come to our ribbon cutting, it'll be so fun. But it's just amazing to be down there, and there's just row after row after row after row of solar panels, and it's really cool. And then our resilience strategy, this is what the board approved in January, spending $10 million over the next 3 years to implement programs for customers who are medically vulnerable, to get solar plus and clean solutions, basically solar plus storage for medically vulnerable folks, solar plus storage at critical facilities like police stations, fire stations, and then also at community resource centers, which the Bellhaven could qualify for. So that's it on procurement. And we're a half hour, 35 minutes behind. I'm going to turn it over to Andy, unless you have other questions on procurement. Oh, come on. He's going to show lots of numbers. Let's see.
Do I need to put this on?
You do. And you have to sit in this hot
Every
seat.
time somebody wants to know something, you have to tell them personally, or we can just record you.
And you're in the hot seat here too, Andy.
And let's get Andy's name up here. Put it in your pocket or somewhere where your phone is.
Okay. Okay to start? Okay, so I basically have two primary areas of my team. Myself and Haley Wu handle the financial analysis, and then Shayna, who you may have talked to, helps out on everything. And then the operations or customer team, which Leslie's a part of, and she mentioned Michael, and Sapna had recently joined and deals with commercial accounts. Commercial account manager. Let's see. Brief history of financials. I didn't want to put that in my pocket. I guess I'm going to have when we started out in February 15, San Mateo County Office of Sustainability authorized $300,000.
I think you broke my microphone.
That's good. It wouldn't be heard anyway. Is it not on?
Okay, yeah, can you put it in your pocket so it doesn't?
Yep. Okay?
So just to start at the top of this slide.
Okay. So there's a little bit of a view of financial history. When we started out, the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability loaned or authorized $300,000 for the initial work and setup. There was a point when the county also provided a $6 million loan to PCE to get started. And we entered into a letter of credit facility with Barclays for a $12 million credit line, which we drew down $6 million. So at one point we had a total of $12 million outstanding as loans to get started. Those were scheduled to be paid off by 2021, but were paid off 2 years ago based upon our success and beating our metrics in terms of opt-outs and how many people enrolled and the like. The board approves, like other cities, a budget every year that runs. So we have a June 30th fiscal year end, like most government facilities, and we have an independent audit. You've heard already a couple times the Audit and Finance Committee meets every other month. It's not exactly every month, every other month. We try to time it around quarterly views. We go through a deep dive with that Audit and Finance Committee on the financials every meeting. And in the quarterly basis, we provide a report to the board of what the summary is, but we don't spend much time at the board talking about financials. And the purpose of the Audit and Finance Committee, we do talk about financial issues. We vetted, the other night, the board approved a change in reserve policy, but the vetting was done in a deep dive at the Audit and Finance Committee first. Deep dive into quarterly financials. The annual audit is reviewed by the independent auditor at that meeting, and then that Audit and Finance Committee reviews a deep dive into the annual budget and makes a recommendation to the board for approval, and then we present that budget to the board for final approval. I don't want to spend too much time on the financials, although I'm happy to spend more time other times. Let me just point out just a couple of things. This was our budget that was approved in June for the 2020 year. This column is year-to-date through 2019 December, so it's 6 months of actuals, and this column is a forecast of the full year. And this column is the forecast versus our original budget. So at this point, we expect to end the year at least $8 million above budget on the revenue line, and I suspect that is conservative, so probably above that. One of the reasons for that is because when we approved our budget, when we went through the budget in May and approval in early June, PG&E had not issued its rates yet for the coming year, and they changed the rates on July 1, and those were beneficial to us. The PCIA was not as much as we anticipated, and the generation rates were increased more than we thought, so therefore we'll be above budget all year long. And the other major positive is in electricity costs. Cost of electricity is expected to end at 200, or right now forecasted to be 209 with a budget of 216. We were conservative on the budget, and so far our worst expectations have not come to fruition. But energy markets are, while we have hedges for most of our business, and therefore it's reasonably predictable, it's not all predictable, and there's fluctuations and volatility in the energy markets that are not always predictable. The other line items are all relatively small in comparison, so you can see $4 million for personnel costs and $4 million community energy projects are $4 million. Everything else is much smaller than the cost of electricity, which is $200 million a year. So a big part of our business is around the procurement part that Jan just spent a good deal of time talking about. Down at the bottom, our change in net position, which is effectively net income, was budgeted to be $33 million. We currently forecast to be at 50 million plus. And we have contributes to multiple years of a very strong position, which I'll show in a second. And we have cash we have $175 million of cash at the end of December, and expect to have $180 million or more by the end of the year. We do have as I said, a reserve policy that is currently set now at 180 days, which is basically 6 months of cash, and you can kind of do the math here that 6 months of expenses is about $115 million. And so while we have $180 million is in excess of that $115 million, it's still, we are subject to a lot of volatility, and there's still some questions about whether that's adequate. In addition, we've also our reserve policy, which I don't want to spend too much time on, although I'm happy to spend more time if you want. We've allocated, in addition to operating reserves, an amount for board-approved programs. So, for example, we talked about resiliency. The board's authorized $10 million for resiliency already, and the board has authorized, excuse me, $16 million for EV infrastructure programs too that haven't been spent, but Raphael talked about them earlier today. So, in addition to an operating reserve, we also carve out amounts that board's approved for programs to make sure we have adequate cash to cover those. This was a projection of what was approved at the board in June. This is the $33 million budget, and for net position for this year, again, we'll exceed that. And at that time, we had a projection for over the next 4 years, which we'll do at this coming year too, where we show revenues relatively flat over the next 4 years, and some amount of operating position being less positive in the future years than we had in the last couple of years. Again, that's somewhat related to hopefully conservative energy cost assumptions. And we've assumed a limited amount of PCIA increases in these years up above here, but if the PCIA surprises us, the revenues would go down more than are shown here. And also we've tried to strike a balance between the assumptions of PCIA and electricity costs, but we've assumed no increase in PG&E rates as well. So if PG&E rates go up, because we tie our rates to that would have a positive impact. If PCIA goes up, that would have a negative impact. There's a lot of pieces that go into long-term assumptions, and we've tried to be reasonably conservative. But assuming that all of those conservative assumptions play out, then we expect to have forecast potentially up to $200 million in cash at the end of 2024. And then I guess there's one more slide. This is just a historical comparison, just so you can see where we've been. The last 3 years have been audited. We had $22 million of change in net position the first in 16-17, and then $63 million, $54 million, and our current forecast for this year is $51 million, to be above that, and again to have cash of about $180 million at the end of this fiscal year if everything plays out the way we think it will. And one more slide I was going to mention. To manage our cash, we have the bulk of our cash, currently about $150 million, is at First Republic. You asked about this the other night. Managing very conservatively. We don't earn a whole lot of return, but we also have very little risk in our portfolio. And we are about to select a second manager and then split the money between those two managers. And the Audit and Finance Committee is meeting a week from Monday to select a second manager.
Real minor question. What are you depreciating? Is that office furniture or stuff?
Office furniture and leasehold improvements on this building. And actually, we've outgrown this space. We have, I think, one space left, and we have 3 positions. So we're actually took over some space in the next building where we're going to house seven people that are moving there in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But there's some more leasehold improvements being incurred there that'll depreciate as well too. But very limited. We don't own any development assets. It's just leasehold improvements and office furniture and computers and stuff like that. Any questions? Okay.
Tag team.
Don't drop it.
Should I just clip it onto this?
Yeah. It's just finicky, yeah.
Shall I test? Okay. All right, just to introduce myself again, Ann Bartoletti. I am the one that will be communicating with the board and the alternates quite frequently. And just to go over some basic information about the board communications, the board normally meets the fourth Thursday of each month, and the exceptions to that would be in September, where usually the last Saturday of the month they have a retreat, and November and December, where we move the meeting forward in order to avoid holidays. The entire year board calendar, the board schedule, is approved by the board each year, and it is posted on our website. We are required to get the agenda and agenda packet out, or at least the agenda, 72 hours in advance. We try to get that out the Friday before the meeting so that board members have the weekend to review the memos, contracts when they're involved in that sort of thing. So normally the Friday before that will be sent out to you. The agenda is posted here and on our website, and then also the agenda packet. In terms of,
Can I
sorry?
just say one thing?
Yes.
Yeah. When you get the board packet, if you have questions, please call me. So as you read through it, you know, especially if you're just starting out, feel free, 'cause that's my job. Make sure you understand what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Okay, so in terms of the board communications, one of the very helpful things you can do is to email me if you are not able to attend a meeting. Definitely also notify your alternate. And so I try to communicate on a frequent basis with the board members as we are leading up to a meeting, but being aware that you have a conflict, or if something else comes up, if you're not feeling well and the alternate can cover for you, that is very helpful. In addition, every Friday, Jan will send out a newsletter. You get timely articles, announcements about meetings and events, and so be sure to check the newsletter because that's where you will also get weekly updates. And then also, I work with Jan to find dates when she is available and then coordinate with you, the board member, the alternate, and your city manager to get you all together at least once a year so that Jan is in touch with what is going on in your community, what the needs are, what she sees coming up with PCE. And so it's a good opportunity for all of you to stay in sync. If you haven't seen the Board of Directors page on our website, you will become familiar with that. We do have our current board roster. Anytime that there's a change, that is updated. The 2020 board calendar, the schedule of meetings is on there. This is also where I will post the agenda packet, handouts that come out of a board meeting, and the PowerPoint presentation. We post the PowerPoint presentation just before the meeting after we've tweaked it the final time. We get it up there so that the board members can pull up that agenda if they wish to, pull up the presentation and go through it while we are live here in our lobby area where we hold the meetings. Here is some contact information from the people that you met today. The one person who is not here is Jeremy. Joe is the Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. Jeremy did a great, not impersonation, but he covered, he covered for Joe very well. Joe was on vacation, but these are some key points of contact. Siobhan was also on vacation, and Jan covered for her, but these are the areas and the folks that you might need to stay in contact with. And now, although we are way past this time, do you have any questions about communications with the board? Do you have any questions for the team who is still here?
It's been great, it's been very helpful. Thank you, appreciate you doing this.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
if
thank
wanna-
you.
Yeah, if you want to come by and meet more of the staff too, that's great. We're all here every day, more or less.
Or let me know if you would like to come in and meet other staff members and I can check their calendar. I have all of them on my calendar. It kind of looks crazy sometimes, but I can verify if they're going to be out of the office and you'd like to pop in and see people.
Yeah, so we try to not have lots of different people from PCE contacting you. So we try to have most of the communications go through Ann. So when you see Ann Bartoletti, we hope that you will open that email up.
I do.
And, you know, or if I send you something with, so we try to not have, you know, I know I'm a council member too, so I know how crazy it is when you get emails and you don't know who you're communicating with. So we try to funnel everything through Ann, because she's the board clerk. That's her job, is to keep you all informed and,
Yeah.
and get you whatever you need.
But thank you for being here.
I have a couple
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, please.
We're talking about undergrounding some utilities and undergrounding electrical lines. Do you have anything to do with that, or that's transmission? So no.
It's PG&E.
Perfect, okay.
All right.
And then the counties, I'm looking at sort of what the, trying to understand the priorities a little bit more.
report this part